The bank sent an eviction notice. He sent them a subpoena, with nothing but a library card and a promise to his mother. Jamal exposed a multi-million-dollar fraud and became a symbol of justice. Watch now. Morning sunlight slipped through the worn-out curtains of 1025 Lawson Avenue, casting long rays over the peeling paint on the weathered wooden porch. Jamal Carter stood motionless on the steps, clutching a thick envelope, his fingers trembling. The envelope bore a bold red stamp. Final eviction notice. Like a sentence hanging over the last piece of legacy his family had left. The 3-bedroom house wasn't just where he grew up. It was the heart of 3 generations of Carters. His mother, Deborah, had spent her entire life paying down every cent of the mortgage, working 2 jobs, day shifts at a laundromat, night shifts cleaning schools, just to protect this place. When she passed, Jamal had stood by her hospital bed, gripping her hand, swearing he'd keep the house. And now, he threw the door open and rushed inside, as if trying to outrun reality. Morning light flooded the living room. Family photos still lined the walls. Deborah cradling young Jamal in her arms, smiling gently, her face weathered from work, but her eyes glowing with pride. In the corner stood an old dark wood filing cabinet. Jamal pulled open the drawers and rifled through the stacks of paper. Final mortgage payoff letters, property tax receipts, a copy of the deed. Everything appeared legitimate, until he saw it. Second mortgage agreement, signed by Deborah. But the handwriting was messy, slanted sharply to the left, completely unlike her usual neat, steady script. This can't be right, Jamal muttered, gripping the document, his heart pounding. His mother had never mentioned any second loan. She was meticulous, never leaving a financial stone unturned. In a fog of confusion, he dialed First Southern Bank. After 27 minutes on hold, a cold female voice came on the line. Foreclosure department, how may I assist you? I'm calling about the property on Lawson Avenue. My mother, Deborah Carter, passed away. She paid off the entire mortgage. I have the paperwork to prove it. I'm sorry. The records show the property has defaulted on a second mortgage signed 2 years ago. The eviction process has already been finalized. The voice was as indifferent as someone reading a weather forecast. Jamal tightened his grip on the phone. She never took out another loan. I suspect that signature was forged. I want to request a full review of all documents. You can submit a formal request to our legal department. However, the eviction order remains in effect and will be executed in 14 days. Click. The line went dead. Jamal stood frozen in the living room. Outside, the neighborhood remained calm, untouched by the storm that had just erupted inside him. This wasn't just about losing a home. It was about being betrayed by a system that had never truly made space for people like him. That afternoon, Jamal Carter drove his old car out of downtown Birmingham, heading toward the branch of First Southern Bank that had issued the second mortgage agreement. In his hands, a thick folder of original ownership records and proof that the mortgage had been paid in full. Inside the cold, glass-walled office, Jamal was invited to sit across from Victor Gaines, the branch manager, a white man in his early 50s, slick back hair, expensive tie, and a smile Jamal instantly recognized as the kind people wear when they don't actually care. I'm here about the eviction notice, Jamal began, trying to keep his voice steady. There's been a serious mistake. My mother never took out a second loan. This is her signature when she was healthy, and this one is supposedly from 2 years ago, right after her stroke. Victor glanced at the papers, then pushed them back like they were nothing but trash. I understand your situation, he said in a flat tone, but the system doesn't make mistakes. If the home is in default, we're within our rights to repossess. You're talking about rights? Jamal leaned forward. What about justice? I'm requesting access to the original loan documents. Victor smirked. Submit a formal request through the legal department, or hire a lawyer. But you should know, the law doesn't usually work in favor of those who are underqualified. The word underqualified hit Jamal like a stone to the chest. In that moment, the truth sank in. This wasn't about a lack of paperwork. It was about who he was, a black man, unemployed, broke, and unheard. 2 days later, Jamal went to Legal Aid of Central Alabama an office known for helping low-income residents with legal issues. The receptionist, a young woman, flipped through his documents and shook her head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carter. We're overloaded. The wait list backed up until next month. Have you tried private attorneys?" He had. 7 firms in 3 days. Some cited conflict of interest. Others said flat out, "We don't take low-probability cases." On the way home, Jamal stopped at a convenience store for a cheap cup of coffee, then headed to the Birmingham Branch Public Library. In his mind, only one option remained: learn the law himself. He checked out 3 books: Foreclosure Law in Alabama, Tenant Rights and Protections, and Pro Se Litigation Basics. He set them down on a worn wooden table by the window and began to read. The legal language was tangled. The phrases felt like traps. But he didn't give up. "If it can be written in English, then I can read it," he muttered. Every night after his shift at the community center, he sat at a small kitchen table under a yellow light bulb, highlighting lines and tracing statutes. One night, his phone buzzed, a text from Tasha Morgan, his girlfriend. "You doing okay? Any progress?" He typed back, "It's bad, but I'm learning. They won't expect me to know the law better than they do." On the wall beside him hung an old photo of his mother, smiling gently with a teacup in her hand, her eyes full of warmth. Jamal stared at it, heart heavy, but resolute. She stamped a motion form. Thud. The sound echoed to the clerk's office. Then she handed it back to him. "Your motion has been accepted. Wait for the judge's ruling. But I'll send the file up today." Jamal left the courthouse holding a stack of documents with a strange feeling. For the first time, the system was being forced to listen to him. The sky over Birmingham was dull and gray, but in his heart, it felt like a crack of light had opened. For days after Jamal Carter filed his motion for discovery, his world began to collapse, not from the outside, but from the most familiar corners of his daily life. On Tuesday morning, he went to the ATM to withdraw money to pay the water bill. The screen flashed a cold message: "Account frozen. Contact Fraud Investigation Department." Not believing what he was seeing, Jamal called the bank's hotline. After nearly 40 minutes on hold, a robotic female voice finally spoke. "Your account has been temporarily frozen due to suspicious activity related to a mortgage dispute under investigation." That's what they called his legal fight: suspicious activity. That afternoon, he received a text from the power company. Unpaid bill. Service scheduled for shut-off at 6 p.m. Jamal called, pleaded, explained the bank issue, but the woman on the line had no room for empathy. At 6:03 p.m., every light in the house went dark. The next morning, his old Ford Taurus, which had been parked along the curb, was gone. He thought it had been stolen, but after asking a neighbor, he learned that a repo truck from the finance company had towed it at 4 a.m. before he could even catch his breath. That afternoon, the director of the Westview Community Center called him into the office. Mr. Henry Wallace's voice was heavy with hesitation. "Jamal, I hate to say this, but we received multiple complaints that your name is attracting the wrong kind of attention for the center. Our donors, they're concerned." "You mean I'm fired?" Jamal asked, his voice flat. "Suspended, at least until things quiet down." As Jamal walked out of the office, the rain started. Cold drops fell like pins stabbing through his weathered skin. No car, no money, no electricity. His life was being dismantled, piece by piece, like someone was snapping the ribs off a birdcage. But that wasn't the end. That night, as he lay curled up in his dark room, with a candle burning low, a strange sound echoed outside his front door. Jamal lifted the curtains slightly. There, standing by the street lamp, was a man in a black suit, still and silent, staring directly at the house. As a passing car's headlights flickered on him, the man turned and walked away, climbing into a gray SUV that idled nearby. No clear license plate, but the neighbor's security camera might have caught something. In that moment, Jamal understood. They didn't just want to evict him, they wanted him erased. But instead of fear, something else rose within him. A burning sensation, not of anger, but of sheer survival. He had nothing left to lose. And when a man has nothing left to lose, he becomes the one thing the system fears most: someone who cannot be controlled. Just after dawn broke over Birmingham, Alabama, Jamal Carter was already inside the public library, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. He sat in a quiet corner near the window, hunched over federal and state statutes on foreclosure, property transfer signatures, and the legal process for reclaiming ownership. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, but his mind didn't slow down. Then a soft voice spoke from behind him. "You're fighting for Southern Bank, aren't you?" Jamal turned around. A Latina woman, probably in her late 20s, stood there holding a thick folder. Her dark brown hair was tied back neatly, and a laminated ID still clipped to her jacket read, "Sophia Rivera, former legal analyst, FSB Holdings." "I used to work there," Sophia said quickly before Jamal could respond. "I saw everything, from how they fast-track foreclosures in black neighborhoods to how they rubber-stamp documents without the homeowners ever knowing." She pushed the folder across the table toward him. "I backed up everything before I left. They called it risk management. I call it a crime." Jamal gently placed a hand on the cover of the folder. Inside were internal emails, meeting transcripts, and a blacklist of priority assets in predominantly black and Latino communities. One email made his skin crawl. "Optimize risk workflow. Complete foreclosure before legal objection can be filed." "Why are you giving me this?" Jamal asked, his voice tight. Sophia met his eyes. "Because I used to believe the system would correct itself. But it doesn't. It's designed to crush people who don't have lawyers, who don't have a voice. People like your mother. People like me." Before she left, Sophia said one more thing. "They'll know it was me who leaked the files. And they'll hit back faster than you think." 2 days later, Sophia called again. Her voice shook. "They froze my accounts. I got fired from my new job this morning. Someone's been walking around outside my house. Jamal, they're threatening me." Before Jamal could reply, the call cut out. Almost immediately, a new message popped up on his phone from Brenda Holloway, the notary public who had stamped the second mortgage document Jamal suspected was forged. "I need to speak with you. There's something I have to tell you." At a small coffee shop near downtown, Brenda, a black woman in her early 50s, held a copy of the second mortgage agreement in her hand. "I didn't witness your mother sign this," she admitted. "A bank representative brought it to my office and said she was too ill to come in. They told me to notarize it anyway to save time." "You know that's illegal," Jamal said, his eyes locked on the bold red notary stamp. Brendan nodded, the weight of regret heavy in her gaze. "I know, but I also know why they picked me. I'm a black notary. Easier to manipulate, easier to silence. They assumed I wouldn't speak up." Just 3 days later, Brenda received a termination notice from the law firm she had been contracted with. Her bank accounts were suddenly frozen with no explanation. Then came the anonymous text message. "Watch your statement, for your family's sake." Watching people get crushed simply for trying to help him, Jamal made a quiet vow. If they were going to drag him this far underwater, he would drag the entire system down into its own filth. Courtroom 3, Jefferson County Courthouse, Monday morning. The tension was suffocating. Jamal Carter, 34, sat silently at the defense table. The suit he wore was old, the stitching fraying at the shoulders, but it was clean. Sitting beside him was attorney Marcus Bell, representing the Justice Collective, a legal nonprofit known for exposing racially discriminatory financial practices. Across the aisle sat a formidable legal team from First Southern Bank, led by their chief counsel Preston Whitman, flanked by branch director Victor Gaines, the same man who had previously dismissed Jamal's documents without even looking at them. The court had convened for an emergency hearing following Jamal's petition the week prior. There were two key objectives: compel the bank to present the original mortgage document and launch a formal investigation into alleged fraud and forgery. Judge William Delaney, a sharp-eyed middle-aged man, struck his gavel. "This court is in session to evaluate Mr. Jamal Carter's petition regarding mortgage fraud. Mr. Bell, you may proceed." Marcus stepped forward, his voice steady and resonant. "Your Honor, we hold in our possession a copy of the so-called second mortgage agreement, which the bank claims was signed by the defendant's mother. However, the signature on this document does not match any verified signature on prior official records. Most critically, the notary, Brenda Holloway, whose seal is affixed to the document, has submitted a sworn affidavit stating that she did not witness the signing. This constitutes a serious violation of Alabama state notarial law. Brenda was called to the witness stand. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained firm. "I made a mistake. I never saw Mrs. Deborah Carter sign anything. A bank employee brought the paperwork and told me to just stamp it." The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Judge Delaney's expression began to shift. Marcus pressed on. "We also have testimony from former employee Sophia Rivera, who worked in the bank's legal department. Your Honor, I'd like to call her to stand." Sophia stood up and pulled out a stack of printed emails from her case folder. Several of the pages were marked confidential. The bank had an internal policy to prioritize foreclosure processing in minority neighborhoods, with the explicit goal of completing the seizure before homeowners could file legal objections. Preston Whitman sprang to his feet. "Objection! These allegations are baseless and well beyond the scope of this hearing." Judge Delaney raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Whitman, this is a fraud hearing. If Ms. Rivera's testimony is accurate, it is very much at the heart of this matter." Jamal rose to his feet, holding the copy of the mortgage agreement. He pointed to the lower corner of the page. "That is not my mother's signature. And if necessary, I have handwriting samples, birth records, insurance letters, even blood donation forms. She never signed like this. Not even close. Especially not while lying in a hospital bed after stroke." A heavy silence blanketed the room. Judge Delaney looked at Jamal, then turned to the plaintiff's table. "I'm issuing a court order. First Southern Bank is to produce the original documents related to the second mortgage within 7 days. Furthermore, I am initiating a formal internal investigation into the bank's property transfer procedures." The gavel came down with a sharp bang. Jamal's eyes burned, not from triumph, but because the truth at last had a chance to echo inside a room where it had never been invited. 3 days later, after Judge Delaney's order to submit the original documents, Jamal Carter received a cryptic text from an unknown number. "The files will disappear before the hearing. Consider your personal best interest." Attached was an anonymous email address. Before he could respond, a man in a gray suit and dark sunglasses appeared outside the Birmingham Public Library, where Jamal had been reviewing files with attorney Marcus Bell. "Mr. Carter?" the man said with a faint, cold smile, extending a thick envelope. "A goodwill offer from the bank." Bell stepped in between them. "And you are—" "Just a messenger," the man replied flatly, and then walked off without another word. Jamal opened the envelope. Inside was a check for $275,000 and a legal agreement stating that by signing, he would drop all legal claims, relinquish ownership of his home, and agree to a permanent non-disclosure clause. Jamal looked at the check, then up at Bell. "They think I'll sell my soul for a payout," he muttered. "They think you're hungry," Bell replied. At that moment, Sophia Rivera, former legal analyst at First Southern Bank, sent a warning text. 2 men had just shown up at her parents' house, claiming to be from an insurance agency, but their questions were all about Jamal. An hour later, notary Brenda Holloway called in a panic. Her bank account had been frozen, and a strange black SUV had been parked outside her home since morning. That night, in a borrowed room Jamal was temporarily renting from a friend, he stared at the hush agreement on the table. At the bottom, italicized words read, "This offer is valid until June 14th, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. After that time, it will be null and void." A soft threat, veiled as a deadline. He called attorney Marcus Bell. "I want this submitted as evidence," Jamal said. "You sure? If we go public with it, the rules change. They won't just make things hard. They'll come at you for real. Then let them know I'm not for sale." The next morning, Marcus Bell filed a non-disclosure agreement with Judge William Delaney, along with a motion to open a formal investigation into witness intimidation and attempted bribery of the defendant. An emergency evidentiary hearing was scheduled, but the tension didn't stop there. That same afternoon, as Jamal stepped out of the courthouse, a black vehicle swerved up to the curb and slammed on the brakes. A man leapt out, shoved Jamal hard in the shoulder, and hissed, "You're playing with fire." Before Jamal could react, the man disappeared into traffic. Marcus rushed over, grabbing Jamal by the arm. This kind of warning isn't new, but now we've got another charge to add: physical intimidation of the defendant. And with a courthouse security camera right there, he pointed to the intersection, they just slipped their own neck in the noose. Jamal looked back at the courthouse. Those doors hadn't just opened a path toward justice. They'd opened a war with a system long addicted to control. But this time, it had picked the wrong man. "I'm going all the way," he said, eyes locked on the black SUV vanishing into the intersection. 2 days after the street side threat, Jamal Carter still hadn't slept through a single night. Every strange sound outside the window, every hallway creak in the rundown motel where he was staying jolted him awake. Attorney Marcus Bell had been locked in his office nonstop, juggling more than a dozen case files, motions, and emergency hearing requests against First Southern Bank. That afternoon, while Jamal sat in the Birmingham Public Library, a text arrived from an unknown number. "Check your email. This time it's real." He opened his laptop, connected to the spotty Wi-Fi, and logged in. A message appeared with an attachment titled, "Push fast, internal_recording_E3 at MP4. He clicked play. The video was grainy, but the audio was crystal clear. Inside a glass-wall conference room at the bank, the voice of Victor Gaines, the branch manager, rang out. "We pushed through every foreclosure case in Birmingham early, before they have time to sue." A colder voice responded, "If the signatures don't match, just call it age-related handwriting changes. The court doesn't have time to verify every file. File now, deal with the mess later." It cut to a brief chuckle, clearly from attorney Preston Whitman, the head of legal. Jamal couldn't believe what he was hearing. He played it again, then saved the file to 3 different devices, uploaded it to cloud, and backed it up on a USB stick. That night, he brought the evidence to Bell's home office. "They just confessed," Jamal said, placing the USB on the desk, eyes burning with the fire of a man ready to strike back. Marcus reviewed the clip and nodded slowly. "This won't just save your house. This will bring the whole damn system down." The hearing took place 2 days later at Jefferson County Courthouse. The courtroom was packed. The back rows filled with reporters, camera crews, and representatives from civil rights organizations. Judge William Delaney entered with his trademark icy gaze. Marcus Bell took the floor. "Your Honor, today we submit an internal audio recording, captured from within the conference room of First Southern Bank, that proves a deliberate, coordinated scheme to accelerate unlawful foreclosures, with racial bias as a driving factor." He pressed play. The recording echoed through the room. Silence fell like ice. Every eye turned toward Preston Whitman, seated beside his defense attorney, his face pale as chalk. Behind him, Victor Gaines was visibly sweating through his suit. As the eerie laughter in the recording came to an end, Judge Delaney leaned forward and growled, "Mr. Victor, do you have any explanation for what we just heard?" Victor stood, lips tightly pressed. I don't recall making such a statement." "Shame the tape has a better memory than you do," Delaney snapped, then turned to Marcus. "This court requires the original file, metadata, and chain of custody verification. If the evidence holds, I will authorize a full investigation." Jamal sat motionless, his fingers clenched around the armrests. He knew the fight wasn't over, but for the first time, the system was listening. The morning after the hearing, the skies above Birmingham, Alabama, were no longer gray and heavy, but the city itself felt tense, as if holding its breath. News of the First Southern Bank's internal audio leak had spread like wildfire. Within hours, headlines flooded TV and online media. Bank conspiracy exposed. Leaked recording shows foreclosure scheme. Judge orders criminal investigation. Big banking faces reckoning. At the Jefferson County Courthouse, Judge William Delaney entered the courtroom with a face like granite. His eyes swept across the parties before him as he slammed the gavel down hard. "This court has reviewed the evidence submitted yesterday, including the audio recording, verified metadata, and sworn testimony from the source. He paused, his voice tightening. Within 7 days, First Southern Bank is hereby ordered to submit all original documents related to the loan of Ms. Deborah Carter, including all transfers, mortgage agreements, and notarized originals. Any delay will be treated as obstruction of justice. Jamal sat up straighter, his heart pounding. Judge Delaney continued, this time with a blade in his tone. The eviction order for 1025 Lawson Avenue is immediately voided. Furthermore, this court is referring the entire case to the Office of the Alabama Attorney General for criminal investigation into possible financial fraud, document forgery, and systemic racial discrimination. Across the aisle, Victor Gaines collapsed back into his chair. At the table in front of him, his once smug attorney, Preston Whitman, now sat pale-faced, hands trembling. And then, something no one expected happened. Preston Whitman, after hearing the words criminal investigation, suddenly stood. Your Honor, I respectfully withdraw from this case and am prepared to fully cooperate with investigators. Gasps echoed throughout the courtroom. That afternoon, the media reported that Preston Whitman had been temporarily suspended from practicing law. Just 1 day later, Victor Gaines, the branch manager of First Southern Bank in Birmingham, submitted his resignation. Jamal stood on the porch of his old house, looking out over the neighborhood where his mother once grew jasmine by the front steps. The final eviction notice sign had been taken down, replaced by a court-certified document declaring lawful ownership, signed by none other than Judge William Delaney. He didn't cheer. He didn't raise his fists in victory. He just stood there quietly, like his mother once did when she made the last payment on their mortgage 10 years earlier. The lesson didn't lie in the gavel strike, or even in the damning recording. It lived in the unyielding courage, in every rejection endured, every sleepless night spent studying law, and every ally brave enough to step into the light. Justice, Jamal now understood, doesn't always win quickly, but when the one written off as powerless dares arise, even the system must bow its head. 2 weeks after the eviction order was overturned, Jamal Carter received a thick envelope from a law firm in Birmingham. Inside was a formal settlement offer from First Southern Bank, $650,000 in untaxed lump sum cash. The condition? A single line. Recipient agrees to make no public statements regarding this matter. Jamal sat on the front steps of the small Birmingham home, where his mother once brewed morning coffee and whispered her prayers, his eyes locked on that line. 6 figures. An easy exit. A clean break, with no more sleepless nights. But he knew, if he signed, the truth would die in silence, and the families who lacked evidence, lacked a voice, would go on being crushed in the dark. That evening, Jamal walked into Marcus Bell's law office and placed the envelope on the desk. They're trying to buy my silence. Marcus didn't look up. And what are you going to do? Jamal replied, his voice steady. I'm not for sale. The next morning, the entire case file, internal recordings, settlement emails, sworn statements from Denise and Linda, and now the hush agreement itself, was submitted directly to the Office of the Alabama Attorney General and the Federal Financial Oversight Commission, FFOC. The consequences came swiftly. First Southern Bank was fined $18 million in civil penalties for mortgage fraud and obstruction of justice. Its Birmingham branch was placed under special federal supervision for the next 5 years. Attorney Preston Whitman had his law license permanently revoked. 3 senior executives were federally indicted on charges of bank fraud, forged notarization, and witness tampering. A few days later, Jamal held a small press conference on the steps of Birmingham City Hall. He had no fancy microphone, no media team, just Marcus Bell, Brenda Holloway, Sophia Rivera, and Tasha Morgan, the people who stood by him when everything seemed like it was falling apart. He shared the entire journey. The eviction notice, the forged signature, the night spent sleeping in his car, and the long road to legal victory. He didn't speak with anger, but with conviction, a belief that the system could be forced to change. If enough people dared to stand up, his story spread rapidly across the state. Families in Augusta, Savannah, Columbus began reviewing their own mortgage files. Many discovered similar red flags: missing transfer signatures, incorrect notarization dates, unannounced document amendments. Within 3 months, over 40 foreclosure cases were halted, sparking a statewide investigation. A special inquiry committee was formed by the state attorney general's office, and at the center of it all was a name no longer unfamiliar: Jamal Carter. He didn't go back to janitorial work, but he didn't become a media celebrity either. Instead, he founded a small group called Hands on the Deed, dedicated to helping families targeted by predatory banking practices. Every week, he hosted free legal workshops at the same community center where he once mopped the floors. Jamal was no longer a man facing eviction. He had become a symbol of resilience, a voice the system could no longer ignore. When asked why he refused the money and didn't just walk away, he simply said, "If I stay silent, I'm no better than they are." The fight wasn't over. The system still had shadows. But from that day forward, Jamal was no longer fighting alone. Because once one person dares to step into the light, others will find the path behind them. And the truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always find a way to rise.